Welcome to the 700 Club. The coronavirus has exploded. There are 1 million cases in Texas alone. The health facilities are maxed out, and people are dying across the country. That's number one. Number two, the leadership of the Pentagon has vanished. The Pentagon is now leaderless. We'll have that story coming up. There's also the possibility of ethnic cleansing against the Christians in the area of Armenia, and we'll talk about that. So it's quite a story coming up. Furthermore, is Georgia going to stop the spread of socialism? We've got an exclusive interview with one of the senators. I think it's going to be quite a show, so you don't want to miss it. So what strict measures are governors now taking to stop the spread of this virus, which has exploded across the country? Will we have lockdowns? What's going to happen? George Thomas has that.
The virus is spiraling out of control. All 50 states seeing rising infection rates with more than 1 million new confirmed cases in the first 10 days of this month and more than 150,000 in a 24-hour period. Health experts say unless strict measures are taken to control its spread, the infections will keep rising. Wisconsin, among several states setting records this week for new cases, deaths, and hospitalization. The governor asking folks to stay home again.
It took us 7.5 months to get to 100,000 cases, but it only took 36 days to add another 100,000.
In Illinois, restrictions and curfews now in place for 4 suburban Chicago counties, bringing more economic pain to local businesses already reeling from 10 months of losses.
I mean, it's going to be brutal. It's going to be crushing, especially to people. The holidays are the busiest times for everyone.
Texas, the state with the most infections, 1 million plus people testing positive for the virus.
Texas, unfortunately, is leading the country now in patients in the hospital as well as number of cases.
The numbers so bad in the Lone Star State that in El Paso, ground zero for the epidemic, patients being treated in dozens of tents across the city. FEMA deploying mobile morgues to hold bodies as the death rate soars in the city. California set to become the second state to pass 1 million infections. This was the scene last night at LA's Dodger Stadium, hundreds waiting in line to get tested. The new surge in infections stretching other states and their hospitals to its limits.
I tell you this in all sincerity, Oklahoma. We are in trouble. Our local and state healthcare resources are approaching their limits. And if nothing is done soon to slow the rise in cases, our hospitals will be more overwhelmed than they already are, and we won't be able to be there for all of those who need it.
Ohio and other states now enforcing a mask mandate.
We know that masks work. They are the easiest, most cost-effective way to limit the spread of COVID-19.
Some states like Oregon prepared this time around to handle the rising volume of cases.
We are better prepared today than we were in February when we identified our first COVID-19 patient.
With Thanksgiving 2 weeks away, the CDC issuing new guidelines urging Americans to stay home and not travel. And if you do gather, do it outdoors and keep the numbers small.
So if you know you're going to go to family gatherings where there's going to be especially older relatives that could be sick or more vulnerable, that maybe that means that for the week or two preceding, you should do less of especially unnecessary types of things.
Meanwhile, Pfizer, out with a vaccine that it claims is 90% effective against the virus, is seeking FDA emergency authorization to get the drug to first responders and for at-risk groups like seniors. George Thomas, CBN News.
We have two potential presidents, one who is saying, I'm the guy and I'm taking over. There's another one who will not be leaving till at least the 20th of January, and maybe not then. And so with that chaos, the Defense Department is now without leaders. Defense Secretary Esper has been fired. James Anderson, acting Undersecretary of Defense for Policy, resigned. Joseph Kerman, Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence, resigned. So that huge military is now somewhat leaderless in the middle of a crisis politically. This is not, it doesn't bode well for the future of America. Well, let's turn in other news. All eyes are on Georgia. Now, this state plays a crucial role in deciding the presidential election and the future of the Senate. And it was said by one of the sitting senators, socialism stops in Georgia. John Jessup has that.
Thanks, Pat. Georgia's Republican Secretary of State ordered an audit of the presidential election results. That means a hand recount of all 5 million Georgia ballots cast. The first count has Joe Biden leading President Trump by more than 14,000 votes. That's less than half of 1%, rather. Meanwhile, Republicans are already stumping the Peach State on behalf of the two GOP Senate candidates, both facing runoff elections on January 5th. Florida Senator Marco Rubio appeared with Senator Kelly Loeffler Wednesday as she fights to keep her seat.
This is literally, you know, the showdown of all showdowns in terms of politics and what it means. And we don't want to win one of them. We want to win both of them. We need to win both of them.
We are going to lock arms and deliver this country. We are going to deliver the American dream. The road to socialism does not run through Georgia.
Democrats currently are 2 seats down in the Senate, and Pat, you well know they need to win both runoff elections to take control from the Republicans.
And I might say the minority leader of the Senate, Chuck Schumer, gave it away when he said, we need to take the Senate so that we can change America. We don't want to change America, and I appreciate what Kenny Loeffler said. The road to socialism does not run through Georgia. And I'd like to make a, you know, the Perdue family apparently is very strong in Georgia. There was a Sonny Perdue who was governor, and the current Senator David is not Sonny. So I said Sonny, and I thank you for giving me that correction. I was thinking, you know, we used to run a station in Georgia. We actually drove down to Atlanta 1 week, and then we drove up here 1 week, and we had Channel 46. In Georgia, and had a wonderful time with our dear friends in Atlanta. So I'm familiar with Atlanta. We live down there off and on. I have to travel. We drove. It takes about 10 hours to drive from Norfolk to Atlanta, and then if you go to Charlotte, that's halfway. So we drove up and we drove back, and you know, once a week. And so my wife and I lived for a while in Atlanta, and we love the people of Georgia, and what was said is true. The road to socialism does not go through Georgia. Okay. Well, a shakeup at the Pentagon in the midst of a contested election is raising questions. CBN national security correspondent Eric Phillips spoke with a national security expert who explains the concerns.
Brad Bowman with the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies tells me he is extremely troubled by what's happening right now. He says the country is resilient and the military ever ready. Still, the timing couldn't be worse. President Trump dropped the bombshell via Twitter Monday that he'd fired former Defense Secretary Mark Esper, saying, quote, Mark Esper has been terminated. I would like to thank him for his service. In the same tweet, the president announced Esper's replacement, Christopher Miller. Brad Bowman is a military strategy expert.
I think the manner and the timing of the firing are unfortunate.
What followed was the resignation of acting Undersecretary of Defense for Policy, James Anderson.
So you have the Secretary of Defense being fired, basically Monday, and then you have what is widely viewed as kind of the number 3 position, the acting Undersecretary for Policy, has turned in his resignation as well.
But it didn't stop there. Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence, Joseph Kernan, also resigned, citing plans to retire for months.
I think it's troubling as well, both for domestic reasons and for international reasons. I say domestically because, we're in a period of transition in this country right now. No doubt we have enemies and adversaries that would like to test us. We're constantly being tested in the cyber domain and elsewhere. And the only thing that keeps some of our adversaries and enemies at bay is the threat of an overwhelming response.
Though Bowman says the shakeup doesn't impact our military readiness, it could give our enemies the impression of chaos or weakness and therefore embolden them to take action.
I focus for a living on threats to our country and what the Department of Defense should do about it. And I'm telling you, the threats are so comprehensive, so grave, and in so many cases increasing and difficult and onerous that we really can't spare an extra day in making sure that we're ready to respond.
Bowman adds the threats will neither wait for Pentagon leadership to settle down nor for our government processes to take place.
Given the threats we confront from China, Russia, North Korea, Iran, terrorism, we don't need a learning curve on January 20th.
I should mention Mark Esper's chief of staff adds to the list of Pentagon departures, and an interesting hire by the new acting defense secretary. Trump loyalist Douglas Macgregor is now a senior advisor at the Pentagon. The White House signaling that the new leadership could help achieve the president's national security priorities, including removing U.S. troops from the Middle East soon. Eric Phillips, CBN News.
Well, as I was praying some time ago, the Lord showed to me, and at least it was impressed upon me, that Trump was going to be severely tested during this period of time, severely tested. Now, just think of these scenarios. The Chinese decide they want to invade Taiwan. So what do? I mean, you've got two potential presidents. You've got the shakeup in the Defense Department. And all of a sudden, what are we going to do? We're going to go in there and defend Taiwan, or we're going to start a war with China. So China goes into the South China Sea, and they start taking on those islands and said, this is ours. And so what do? We send the fleet in there, we begin a war, or we leave it alone. The Iranians, we're going to talk about that in a future broadcast. They have now about 10 times the amount of enriched uranium that they agreed to under those accords they signed with Obama. They were supposed to have about 500 pounds of the stuff. They've got about 5,000 tons of enriched uranium. How soon will they have a bomb? So they've got a nuclear weapon. And also, you read the book of Ezekiel, there's a coalition coming against Israel, that certainly they would be emboldened to say, how could America stop us now if we decide we want to do something? And we're also going to talk now about the possibility that Erdogan is doing everything he can to do ethnic cleansing in Armenia, that they did once before. And he sees himself as establishing a caliphate. We are going to be faced with challenges that are unbelievable. And to have chaos in the Pentagon, chaos in the politics right now, plus a pandemic that is sapping our strength, do we ever need the power of God? Okay, John?
Do we ever need it, Pat? Because the 2020 hurricane season is a season that just won't quit. Tropical storm Aydah made a second landfall in Florida this morning, hitting the North Florida coast with a potential storm surge of 2 to 4 feet. It is expected to drop 1 to 3 inches of rain as it crosses the state Thursday, before moving along the East Coast and out to sea later in the week. And a 29th named storm, Theta, has now formed in the Atlantic, setting a new record for the number of named storms in one season. Well, looking overseas to this week's peace deal ending the war between Armenia and Azerbaijan, while the agreement halts the suffering of tens of thousands of civilians, many Armenians believe it puts something greater at risk: their history as a Christian nation. CBN contributing correspondent Chuck Holton reports from the capital, Yerevan.
Unrest still grips Armenia after a peace deal accepted by its president that he described as painful. Since September, the citizens here have been under attack from their neighbors, Azerbaijan and Turkey, over the region of Nagorno-Karabakh. Many in that region fled to the capital, Yerevan, and are now protesting what they see as surrendering their future. For months, the entire country supported the war effort, even as the Azeri military continued to pound civilian areas.
This has become an existential issue. This is an issue of ethnic cleansing and terror-inspiring means applied by Azerbaijan towards Armenians who live there.
It was started by the Azeris, who are trying to not only take territory that has been historically Armenian for thousands of years, but they don't want to stop with just the taking of territory. They want to wipe out the Armenian people.
The Armenian military is vastly outnumbered, some say as much as 8 to 1. After the Azeri military claimed to have taken the region's second largest city, Shushi, the situation turned dire.
They're backed openly by the Turkish government, who on the one hand say there was never a genocide, and on the other hand will say, now we're coming to finish what we started.
But Armenians say this fight was about more than a territorial dispute.
The first nation on earth to officially embrace Christianity, and that is something that the Turks and the Azeris don't want. Erdogan, who's president of Turkey, seeks a revived Ottoman Empire with Islam at its head. And right now, Armenia and the Republic of Artsakh are standing in the way of that vision.
Not only does this current truce stop the bloodshed for the moment, it also forces Armenia to give up land it has occupied for centuries. After news of the peace deal, angry protesters took over a government building, calling for the president to resign.
Tens of thousands of people have been displaced in this conflict, and many of them have taken up shelter here in Yerevan with their family, with friends, or some people are just taking in refugees out of the goodness of their own hearts.
Since day one, we had a lot of families who had to relocate and come to Yerevan and other cities of Armenia. I hosted in my house a family of 12, and then I asked my parents to host another family, and all my friends' houses, people host families in their houses, and then we needed accommodations who could host more people, obviously.
Now, many of these refugees face an uncertain future as their homes have been seriously damaged or destroyed. Russian peacekeepers patrol the ground in the Nagorno-Karabakh, but the people of Armenia say this crisis is far from over, and they fear their rich religious history will soon be wiped out in the areas they no longer control.
Their very existence is endangered right now. And as Americans, as Christians in America, we have that obligation to support Armenia and Artsakh.
From Yerevan, Armenia, I'm Chuck Holton for CBN News.
Pat, and all of this could mean that this is a tenuous peace deal.
Of course it's tenuous because the Bible says something else is going to happen. You know, when America is weakened, now here's the deal. When you read Ezekiel 38, it says in the latter days, when Israel is living at peace in the land, there's going to come a horde of people, Gog and Magog. Now, where is Gog? It's Turkey. And who is going to be part of it? It's going to be Persia, which is Iran. And it'll also be part of Kush, which is down there in the area of Africa, which has not yet made a deal. They claim they have North Sudan, but they really are not making a deal with Israel. So Israel's making a deal with the Emirates and making a deal with maybe Saudi Arabia is coming on board. But when America is weakened, that's when they're going to move. And it is imminent, ladies and gentlemen. It is imminent. You just keep your eyes on the newspapers and listen to what's going to happen, because that man in Turkey, Erdogan, is a thug. He thinks that he is the successor to Muhammad, and he's going to be the caliphate, and he's going to have expanded territory. And the Armenians are just start of it. What they did to the Armenians in the past was absolutely horrible, but they're going to do it again, at this time to Israel. And the coalition is coming, it's forming. And when America is weakened, as it has been because of the things I've just explained, that would be the trigger for these guys to move, because they say, America will not stand against us at this point because it's too weak to do it, and we're going to make a play against Israel. Watch your news, because it's in the Bible, and it will. What's in the Word? You know, when Jesus said, I've got to do these things that Scripture might be fulfilled, Scripture will be fulfilled in this day and age.